Ready, Doug? Okay, we'll call this special meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Murphy.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Turco.
Here.
Councilmember Gross.
Here.
Councilmember Hasselbrink. Here.
Special orders of the day. We will now turn things over to the city clerk.
So our first item of the day will be to interview applicants for the city council vacancy. The council will be making appointments to fill the current vacancy. The term will end November 2020. We received 2 applications from Tanya Doby and Alex Duran. And we'll turn it over to the council now to begin the interviews.
Thank you. We're going to go in alphabetical order, so Tanya, you'll be first. If you join us, please. And please provide an opening statement to introduce yourself and your involvement in the community, please.
Gladly. Good evening, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and council members and other esteemed guests. My name is Tanya Doby, and I have been a resident of Los Alamitos since 2014. We moved here to enroll our children in the fantastic schools here in Los Al. Since moving here, I've been very active in both the school district and the community. I am the president for the nonprofit group at my elementary school, Friends of Rossmore, and I have been for the last 2 years and have been on its board for the past 3. I have also been the VP of membership for the PTA Council, and I am the volunteer coordinator for my school's PTA group. I am also on the steering committee for my elementary and have been on the school site council for my elementary as well. In our community, I am a very active member of the Parks, Recs, and Cultural Arts Commission and have been for the past 3 years. I even volunteered at the last Taste for Los Al, helping with the online bidding that they had switched to this year.
Thank you. Shelley, you want to take the first question?
Sure.
Hi.
Hello.
What do you believe is Los Alamitos' biggest issue?
So I believe the biggest issue that Los Al faces is the same issue that most growing cities face, and that's how to grow while still trying to accommodate the wishes of its residents and the available funds. It can be a very delicate balance, but in my experience, open and direct communication is a great bridge builder.
Thank you. Dean? Dean?
I think she stole my question.
No, you.
First one.
You took.
But that's all right,
You
I
took
can move
biggest
down.
issue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Best
right.
thing.
What do you think is the best thing about Los Alamitos?
So I'll go with one of the best things about Los Al is its small town feel. The family atmosphere, people really do know each other and even return to the community after they've gone on to college and started their own families to come back and raise their children here. And to me, that's a great testament to a city's atmosphere and culture.
Mark?
Sure. Hi, Tanya.
Hello.
What is your position on fiscal responsibility and budget surplus?
So in simple terms, it means using your money wisely without overspending. And I believe it's achieved by either reducing spending or increasing taxation, and the process should be done slowly. You have to find a way to increase revenues somehow. And I started looking at the sustainability mode that's online, and I see that there's some ideas, but basically it's making sure that we take care of our city so people continue to want to move here and we continue to grow and thrive.
Thank you.
Thank you. What are your long-term strategies and ideas for the city?
So I would first have to learn what's already being worked on and be ready to give input that furthers or tweaks or offers an alternative to what's been worked on thus far. Some things that I would look to consider are what are the core mission as far as for our city, our community, and our citizens? What is the vision statement? And what are we doing to hope to achieve our goals using our mission statement? Strategic priorities, which are economy, neighborhood livability, health and safety, transportation, culture and entertainment, efficient and high-performing government, and accountability. How do we keep track of those measurable goals?
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to the council for any other questions you want to do, and I'll keep track and make sure we ask Alex the same ones. And any further questions for Tanya? No?
I don't have anything.
No. Okay. So much for that idea. Do you have a closing statement you'd like to make?
Well, my goal essentially is to use my experience. I have an HR background and knowledge coupled with my knowledge and love for the city to involve all of the available stakeholders. Be bold but realistic in what our goal and our mission is. To not be afraid to acknowledge what our weaknesses are and then try to use them to our advantage, because weakness is not a bad word. Sometimes it just gives you a measurable goal, something that you can grow into. But also not to neglect our strengths, to continue to capitalize on those things that we are already doing exceptionally well and strive to do even greater. And then to also seek out help. I believe that cross collaboration is such an effective mode of growing any new idea, and keep the focus on the goals of the city and the entire community, and that includes employees and our residents.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alex?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor,
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, council members, distinguished guests. I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you today about my desire to serve on the City Council. I have lived in our city for 8 years, and I currently hold the position of chair for the Commission of Parks, Recreation, and Performing Arts, Cultural Arts, excuse me. I'm also the PTA chairperson for special education at Lee Elementary School. In my professional life, I have more than 25 years of experience in security management as well as public safety. Some of the highlights of my career include working as a uniformed security officer at the Oakwood Apartments in the Mid-Wilshire District during the 1992 Los Angeles riots. I also worked in the same capacity in Woodland Hills during the 1994 Northridge earthquake. Once I promoted into management, I assumed managing the entire security officer program. In this role, I also conducted annual audits of 50 locations throughout the country, as well as investigations involving harassment, misconduct, and illegal activities. I also wrote the company's emergency procedures manual and provided annual training for security officers and managers throughout the country. From Oakwood, I went to SOS Security in the capacity of president of West Coast Operations. In this capacity, I managed 400 security officers, 17 branch managers who provided security services to 85 locations throughout the West Coast. I also managed a team of 15 off-duty police officers for executive protection events, which included personal protection of clients, as well as the transportation of jewelry and sensitive electronic devices for celebrities and businesses. In my current role, I'm the Vice President of Operations for Street Plus. Street Plus provides security services in the public domain in cities throughout the country. These services include public safety teams who work closely with the police department, conduct bicycle and foot patrols to address quality of life crimes. My current areas of responsibility include the cities of Burbank, Lancaster, Riverside, Modesto, Santa Rosa, the South Los Angeles Industrial Tract, as well as the historic core section of downtown Los Angeles, which is 2 blocks from Skid Row. 2 years ago, I launched a national program to focus on homeless outreach. Our teams of homeless outreach ambassadors engage with the street population and work to connect with them with services that are available through city, county, and state agencies, as well as nonprofit organizations. In this role, I work very closely with business owners, police, and fire departments in connecting people with the governmental services that are at their disposal. This outreach program is currently in place in the cities of Burbank, Berkeley, Chicago, Los Angeles, Reno, and Salt Lake City. Throughout my professional career, I have learned that there is never enough money to do everything on the wish list, and that not everyone agrees all the time, and that sometimes doing what's right is not always popular. I'm an open-minded person and believe in listening to all points of view to have a complete understanding of a situation. It is my desire to bring these years of experience into service as a member of our city council.
Thank you.
Hi, Alex.
How you doing?
What do you believe is Los Alamitos' biggest issue?
The biggest issue for our city is the fiscal sustainability issue. This is a projected deficit of $1.4 million for the years 2020 and 21, and this deficit is projected to increase to $3.4 million in 2027 and 28. This is an issue that will affect everyone who lives, works, and visits our city. It will become a permanent marker in our chronological history. The same way people refer to it as events such as before and after a new housing development was created, people will refer to life in Los Alamitos as before and after the fiscal sustainability issue. As serious as this situation is, I have the highest confidence in our present leadership. The men and women who serve this city bring with them the highest level of competence as well as professionalism. When this issue is behind us, whatever steps were taken, I am confident that pundits from all points of view will look back and agree that our city leaders took action that was reasonable, necessary, and acted in a manner that is consistent with preserving our community and our way of life.
Thank you, Dean.
What do you think is the best thing about Los Alamitos?
The best thing about Los Alamitos is the sense of community, and this is shared throughout all aspects of the city. Everyone enjoys being here and takes pride in our tight-knit community. When I called the city to report a beehive in the alley behind our home, a live person answered the phone, and the matter was addressed within a couple of days. When I called the police department to report a suspicious person banging on my door at 11:30 at night, they were there in less than 5 minutes and addressed the matter. But the best example I can give is a story that I love to share about our eldest daughter, Caitlin. Caitlin has autism, and she was nonverbal until the age of 4. She was in first grade when we moved here. Through a lot of hard work, an amazing school district, and a community that believed in her, she was able to not just survive, but thrive both socially and academically. As she continued her education, she developed a passion for the performing arts. She became involved in the choir programs at Oak Middle School and Los Alamitos High School, where she was also in the drama department during her junior and senior year. Our little girl, who was once nonverbal, was now performing in front of hundreds of people. She graduated last year and is currently involved in, yes, another production. Yes, Caitlin worked very hard. Yes, her mother and I worked very hard. But without the resources of this community, the school district, the programs offered by the Parks and Recreation Department, and the community that supports them as well, and without the friendships that we developed, I did not believe that Caitlin would be the strong, talented woman that she is today. I just want to acknowledge her. Caitlin, thank you so much for being you. That's it for that.
Thank you. Mark?
Hi, Alex.
How you doing, Mark?
What is your position on fiscal responsibility and budget surplus?
So the other day I was reading an article in Bloomberg, and it summed up my belief. And the quote goes like this, quote, "Fiscal responsibility is as much a moral duty as it is an economic concern. Fiscal responsibility is vital to providing a more prosperous way of life for the next generation, and the action that we take today or fail to take will determine our future," end quote. To keep it in its simplest form, we cannot spend more money than we have. If we do not have enough revenue, then cuts to the budget are required. The only alternative to cuts is an increase in or an additional source of revenue. And with regard to a budget surplus, a situation in which revenue received is greater than what is needed, if we should find ourselves so fortunate to be in that situation, I believe that we must be extremely responsible. My recommendation would be that up to half of that be put into our reserves, while the rest go to funding capital improvement projects to maintaining our city services.
Thank you. What are your long-term strategies and ideas for the city?
My long-term strategies and ideas for the city are to meet and speak with as many people as possible about any questions, comments, or concerns that they may have. In my role as a commissioner, I attend as many events as possible, which includes senior lunch, music and movies, spring carnival, trunk or treat, and winter wonderland. And at each of these events, I speak with those in attendance asking for their feedback. In the role of a city council member, I would continue to do that, but I would also expand it to have regular listening sessions, which would be similar to Coffee with a Cop, to solicit feedback from the community. A couple of other items that I would like to explore would be to see the feasibility of adding a permanent dog park to our city, to see the feasibility of adding red light cameras to the intersections of Cerritos Avenue and Los Alamitos Boulevard, as well as Cerritos Avenue and Bloomfield Street. And I'd also like to review and, if necessary, propose taking actions to update the city's emergency and crisis procedures, which should include the city's response to an earthquake, long-term power outage, active shooter, or a biological, chemical, or cyber attack.
Thank you. Do you have a closing statement?
Closing statement is, I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you all today. It's my sincere hope that I'll be able to serve this city in the capacity of a city council member.
Thank you. You know, we kind of jumped right into this, so I want to thank both of you for applying today. You know, we have two excellent candidates, and we can only pick one. I've often said during the commissioners' appointments that this is really the worst job we do in the city, is to tell somebody no thank you when they are willing and able to help us out. A reminder, if you are the loser tonight, there is a new election in November, and I hope you'll consider that.
Loser's a strong word.
If you finish second in this in this large field, congratulations, but you still need to know about the election. I'm going to ask the city clerk to explain the procedure from here so everybody knows what we're going to do.
At this time, we're going to pass out indications of support where council will mark their preference for the desired applicant. I will read those results out loud. Once the results have been read, we will still need a motion and a second to appoint the applicant. And at that time, we will swear them in after.
Thank you. Did Dean turn mine?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry.
that was with mine.
Oh, I missed it.
We have 3 indications of support for Tanya Doby and 1 indication of support for Alex Duran.
I'll make a motion to appoint Tanya Doby.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Actually, Mayor, if we can have a roll call, please.
Oh, all right.
Sorry, Mayor Murphy,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Turco,
Aye.
Councilmember Gross,
Aye.
Councilmember Hasselbrink.
Aye.
Congratulations. We'll do the swearing in now.
Yes, we will. Let me just find-
And right into fiscal sustainability. Right into fiscal
Ms. Doby, if
Yeah.
you'll join me at the front. You're going to raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Tanya Doby,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic.
foreign and domestic,
I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and that I take this obligation freely
and that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
We're going to take a 5-minute break, please.
cake.
Huh? No cake, no.
Once it's southbound at 3rd, hard to downtown, there is a crash. Looks like they made it off to the right
E, fiscal sustainability. Les, you start?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Council members, first of all, congratulations, Councilmember Dobie.
Thank you.
I want to first of all introduce, we have a presentation. I want to introduce the 3 staff members that'll be speaking with you at different times this evening. We have Eric Hendrickson, our finance director, David Kane, our fiscal sustainability manager, and also we have John Fairbank, who is the consultant from FM3 who conducted the community survey. So we'll have a number of slides to go through this evening, but before we proceed with that, I want to mention that tonight is an opportunity for us to focus on the results of the community outreach that has been conducted, and the fact that we've reached out to approximately 500 residents during that community outreach effort, and also the conducting of the recently completed community survey, and then subsequently the ability for council to discuss the next steps to be taken. The process to date is focused upon us providing facts to the community and gathering feedback from our residents and business owners. As was noted during the outreach efforts with the survey, no decisions have been made to date. So our effort was, again, just to try and gather facts, state the facts and gather information without any indication of a direction. That outreach effort has been both comprehensive and quite engaging, as some of you have noticed as you've attended those meetings, but all of it has been very worthwhile. Those that have participated, we want to thank everyone for the time that they spent coming out to those community meetings and hearing what we have to say and communicating with us, the various emails that we've received, phone calls that we received, and also to those that took the time, over 300 residents that took the time to complete the community survey. We hope that the information that's provided to you tonight and the discussion that's to follow will ultimately help council, help all of you with the difficult physical decisions that lie ahead for the city. So with that, I'll turn over this to Eric and David for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Wanted to spend a little bit of time this evening going back and looking at where we've been, where we're at, and where we need to be able to go. So really wanted to talk about the issues at hand. This has been a process that we've been working on. This started in 2018. As indicated in the staff report, I listed all of the various meetings that we've had, whether it's been through the budget process, whether it's been the development of the long-range plan. All of those things are a part and parcel of this process. But what we're recognizing and recognized as we started down this road in 2018 is we're at a fiscal crossroads. We need to determine where we're going to go in the future because we're not sustainable as an organization. As we look at the long-range plan, our expenditures are going to way out exceed our existing revenue stream, and as we've talked about in our various community meetings, that revenue stream is very limited when it comes to property tax and sales tax for a variety of reasons. The other option, the bottom line would be to massively cut programs and service levels. But even those items that we identified came up with about 21 different items. If we were to take all of those and implement every single one of those, that represents about $1.2 million in cuts. We need well above $3 million a year. City has done a good job of putting reserves aside for a very specific purpose, part of it being working cash, that type of thing. But we'll show you momentarily here, and we've shared with the community that quickly goes away. So we've been looking at and proactively looking at solutions, but what we really wanted to define what the problem was and what is fiscal sustainability. Because a lot of times communities and organizations go, hey, we balanced the budget this year. Well, that's fine, and Los Alamitos has done that also. But our challenge is down the road as we look at the long-term plan, our ongoing revenues cannot meet our ongoing expenses. And so we need a plan that really addresses that in the long term along with funding for capital projects or essential programs that we need to be able to do. So this is really that definition of what fiscal sustainability is. So what were some of the goals that we looked at that we wanted to accomplish in this process? Is we wanted to develop a 10 to 20-year plan that really looked at where we were going to be headed. It's much easier these days to do a long-term plan because CalPERS provides us a 30-year window in terms of projected costs as it relates to pensions. So it's easy to be able to put that information in there and really project, similar as to you and I would do with our mortgage, our car payment. We know what that obligation is going to be down the road. What is the monthly obligation going to be? And so being able to put that information in there and then begin to look at and identify what are some of the options that we could look at in terms of reduction in services or revenue enhancements. And then the other thing that we felt was extremely important, we needed to engage the community. We needed to get feedback from the community. We needed to hear from the community. This is not, a staff proposal. It is hearing back what are the priorities from the community. And so we've gone down that path, and I'll share a little bit, what we did in there. What our priorities are is to maintain our existing city service levels. As we're hearing in our community meetings, as you'll see in the survey this evening, that is one of the resounding things that we've heard from the community over and over again. We love Los Alamitos. We live in this community because of the services that we're getting, and especially the public safety. And so recognizing that we needed to maintain those. How are we going to address the structural deficit, the expenditures over revenue, the 1.4 million that's projected next year growing to 3.4, ultimately 3.7, represents about $42 million when you look at the long-range plan. It's cumulative each year. The other thing is we've identified very clearly a very comprehensive list of capital projects, CIP, whether it's the community center, whether it's City Hall facility, all of those need to have retrogrades, upgrades, about $60 million worth of projects. Where's the funding for that going to be? When you've got a structural deficit, you're trying to balance the budget, you don't even have money for capital projects. So that's an important part of it. So we've completed the long-range plan, gone back to council with the 10-year plan. That 10-year plan is sitting on our city website so that everybody can look at it, work closely with the Budget Standing Committee, looking at an analysis of all of the revenues and expenditures, and then did a large number of community meetings, whether it was at the community center or going out to the local parks in the evening, sometimes getting 10 people, sometimes getting 40, 50, 60 people. We never knew what to expect, but probably over 500 people that we've been in contact with, had conversations with, shared, asked for feedback. One of the things is we had a board of, what are the priorities, and everybody got to put on that board what were their priorities. We have that, so we've heard back from the community in terms of what's important to them. Made sure that we're getting all of this information out on the city website, using Facebook, using social media locations to, again, get the information out to the community so the community is aware of what's going on. Getting feedback as it relates to what are service priorities. Because there's a variety of services in there, what exactly do those look like? And then we have also completed, with the help of FM3, a statistically valid survey with registered voters in Los Alamitos, and we'll share that information also. So when we look at some of the key sustainability points that we feel are key to this process, we've got a structural deficit that's going to grow over time. We're going to run out of working cash if we don't do something as early as 2021. That's working cash that we need to pay bills in between our receipt of property taxes. We don't have the opportunity to wait and see if things get better. I mean, we're at economic peak at this particular point in time. We're not into the recession that we were for a number of years. We did a lot of cutbacks during that time. We also did contracting out for services, whether it was street sweeping or various departments, and we don't have a lot of undesignated reserves. So with that, I'd like to have Eric kind of share some of the financial information.
Thank you. So these are the same slides that have been shown at these fiscal sustainability presentations. This one up here is the 10-year budget projection. We've balanced the last 2 years of budgets. We ended last year on a positive note, revenues exceeding expenditures, but this is quickly going to be going downhill, as you can see here. The red line is operating expenditures, the blue line is our projected revenues, and the yellow line on the bottom is a subset of the expenditures. That's our pension costs. That's one of the main drivers in terms of why our expenses we project to far out exceed our revenues in the coming years. This next slide shows the general fund cash position. Right now, we usually sit between $7 to $8 million of general fund cash at the end of each fiscal year. That's been steady for the last 4 fiscal years, but based on the projection of expenditures exceeding revenues, we project the cash levels to start to decrease starting next year. And yeah, in 2022-23, we run out of operational cash. That's more of a cash flow issue, and all cash will be exhausted before 24-25. We just finished up our comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019. This first column here is the total amount of general fund cash. So we ended the year, the general fund had $8.8 million in it. The red line on the bottom is what's undesignated, though. That's kind of what's left over after City Council and city staff have designated where that $8 million needs to be sitting. You'll see here most of it sits with CalPERS reserves. Some of it sits with our OPEB reserves as well. We need working cash flow. That's our emergency money that City Council has to authorize us to use for fiscal emergencies. So pretty much this 595 of undesignated general fund cash is sitting there. Probably we need to use that for balancing next year's budget. I can tell you right now, we're just starting our budget session, starting to look at what 2021 has to hold for us. And I can tell you right now that we're going to need that $595,000 to balance next year's budget. And hopefully we can make some good decisions going forward in terms of future revenues as well. But it's looking very likely that we'll need that money for the next fiscal year. As far as city services go, what's been done to lower these costs? We have reduced city workforce by 25 full-time staff over the last 10 years. That's a full-time equivalency, so some part-timers, some full-timers, but we've already done our part in trying to reduce how many city employees we have on payroll. We've reduced the healthcare subsidies for city employees. We've implemented the 2-tier retirement system as dictated by PEPRA, the PEPRA law of 2013. There's a 3-tiered salary schedule as well for most of the unions. So any new employees hired in are hired in at a lower hourly rate. City employees fully contribute to their retirement. And we do contract some city services such as building permits, inspections, trees and landscaping, street sweeping, that sort of thing. Different options to reduce city service costs. We presented to City Council a couple months ago all the options, and these are just some of them, but we show this again just to point out that we can start nitpicking some departments. We can start diving into who spends what kind of money, but at the end of the day, if we start cutting some things, it's not going to really impact the full budget crisis that we're facing. We can eliminate some police programs, eliminate some recreation programs, eliminate how much the general fund contributes towards capital projects, but again, at the end of the day, we're still going to be sitting here with, ideas that need to be brought out. far as what's been done to help, to maximize sales and property tax revenues from HDL, they're our consultant that we use to accurately forecast to make sure we get the best bang for our buck in terms of sales and property tax, the two main revenue sources in the city. We've had a proactive economic development in terms of getting the new hotel up and running and the relocation of the Epson headquarters. We've done our full cost recovery of city services, as well as utilizing the new SB1 monies to put those towards our roads. And in terms of any revenue solution, we're really trying to aim for having local control. We need funds that the state cannot touch, and if it all increases to taxes have to be voter approved, but we really want that money sitting in Los Alamitos and not another district or the state. It really needs to be for Los Alamitos' needs. We have to maintain service levels. This is really an effort to keep the money here. We've heard very loudly from the residents during all of our community meetings that they do not want a tax on their home. A parcel tax is just not going to fly here. And so we are very receptive to that, and that's something that we're not considering. And at the end of the day, there needs to be have community accountability and transparency in all of this as well. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to David Kane.
So this slide really shows, based on the feedback we're getting from the community, and you'll also see in the voter survey, what are some of the revenue enhancement options. And what we've listed here, based on the feedback that we're getting, is what's most viable, that we're hearing from everybody, is a sales tax, transaction tax, because this gets paid for both by residents and non-residents. Something that is less viable from the residents' perspective is a utility users tax. Again, it's 100% borne by the property owners in the community. Hotel tax, or what we call a TOT tax, very receptive, but it's paid for by people that are living outside the community that are coming into a couple of the hotels that we have, one new one that is shortly to be completed. But it's not a solution because the percentage that we're getting on it is very small dollar amount. So even if we were to increase it 3 or 4 or 5%, we're getting $250,000 out of that result. What we've heard clearly from the residents is that the parcel tax, as well as full cost recovery on recreation programs, are really not something that they're interested in. So what we've heard is that today there is a real priority from the residents' perspective about maintaining 911 services, senior and youth programs. That's part of the groups that we went out and talked to. Maintaining neighborhood patrols that are out in the community, making sure that our streets are being repaired, looking at and protecting anti-gang and anti-drug programs through our local police services, as well as proactively, and we have been doing this, looking at maintaining business attraction programs. So at this point, I want to turn it over for a few minutes to John Fairbank, who is the one of the principals and partner with FM3. He's got a presentation on the survey results that were completed during the month of November. And at the conclusion of that, then we'll wrap it up with a couple more closing comments.
Good evening,
Good evening.
Mayor, council members, Councilwoman Dovey, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm going to walk through a slide presentation here of a public opinion research survey conducted by, I'm a partner in Fairbank, Maslin, Mullen, Methuen Association. And you're going to move the slides forward for me? Yes? Okay. This survey was conducted at the end of November. We pull our voter registration samples from the voter registration rolls, and we're looking at voters who we interviewed in this survey that have histories of voting and are very likely to vote in the November 2020 election. Anybody who did not have a past voting history in the last 3 or 4 elections was not included as a likely voter. The survey was conducted both, thank you, both online and by telephone. Everything was available in English and Spanish, if you wanted to do interview in Spanish. And as I go through this, feel free to ask questions or challenge conclusions here. The mood of the electorate. This is a quick warm-up question we just kind of generally ask. Are things going in the right direction or off on the wrong track? You can see here that we have 44%. This is positive. One of the themes for your city, from your voters, they like living here. They like the job that the city government is doing. They think the city's going in the right direction. You do have about 30% who aren't able to say right or wrong direction. And this is one of the themes that I'm going to highlight as we go through this. The more your voters know about your challenges and your needs, like you had in this presentation, you're going to see, I think we showed in the survey, the more they understand about your challenges and your needs, the more they support you and the more they support financing, helping finance those needs. They think you're doing a very good job. This is excellent and pretty good, 64%, almost 2/3. It's one of the lowest poors we've ever had in the city on basically city government overall. So, and this is something that most all voters have a view on. So they see you as positive, they trust you. You also have, I'm going to show you 2 slides here. This is a question that asks about what are the problems here? How serious are they? Extremely serious problem in red, somewhat very serious, somewhat or not much of a problem. All of these are very low. I'm not suggesting you don't have problems on traffic or homelessness or crime or street repairs, but these are in comparison to most of the cities in this state. We do polling for the California League of Cities and probably polled for most of the cities in this county. These are very low numbers in intensity and overall extremely very serious. In most cities, you will see homelessness as the top issue. Sometimes in most cities, it's 40% extremely serious problem. 75 to 80% extremely or very serious. Here it's 12%. Again, I'm not suggesting it's not a problem, but in level of intensity, it kind of follows the theme of we like where we live, we're happy here, the problems are fewer than what we see in other cities. Again, these are just very, very low. Right? You can see the blue here, not too serious a problem at all. Your parks and recreation programs, your city parks, the condition of the economy. Things are pretty good here, generally speaking, for voters. This is a question we ask about, do you think the city needs more money? If you are considering a finance measure sometime in 2020, we would like voters to be at least 60, 70% understand that you need money. We have a difficult time of getting voters to support finance measures if they don't think there's a need. So here again, you have about 20 to 25% who really don't know your needs. The presentations here that you're doing throughout the community are extremely important to basically communicate just the basic facts of life. And you have a great need is the same as no real need. Again, in most cities in this county, we're seeing 65, 70% great or some need. We also asked about some local ballot measures. Okay, we asked about 5 of them. Primarily, most of the questions were asked around the 1-cent sales tax, which would raise $3 million. The parcel tax, another parcel tax, UUT, and the transit occupancy tax. We asked more questions about the sales tax. That, generally speaking, is the preferred taxing mechanism for most voters in this state, whether it's on city or county. So, when we asked voters, this is definitely yes, probably yes, the reds are no. Your 1-cent sales tax started at 68% to 28%, a very strong number. 35% were definitely yes. 33 were probably yes. Basically, there was very little undecided. So everybody had it, they know what it is, they understand what it is, they know where the money's going. We gave them a 75-word description of what they would see. This is by far at least in our view, the most viable measure to raise you significant amounts of money. The 4% TOT tax was at 60%. That only raises $230,000, but that also is clearly not as strong as the sales tax. And then as David mentioned, we tested these, the UUT, the parcel taxes. This is a 1,100 parcel tax. This was a 5% definitely yes. So basically these 3, we would not suggest are viable yes.
I had a quick question. Sure. When you did the survey and you presented the 5 different options, did you also let them know how much revenue each of the options would raise?
I believe we did, yes.
Okay.
I know we did on the sales tax. Yes, we told them what the tax was and how much money would be raised.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense.
Okay. Just quickly, the sales tax in every council district, 65 or higher, except for District 2, which is pushing 60%. You need 50 plus 1 to pass. And this is pretty indicative of whether you own a home, whether you're a renter, whether you were 35, whether you were 65. Generally speaking, you had a pretty across-the-board demographic profile of most all voters in most of your council districts are supporting this measure. I'm just showing income here to show you as a description showing that whether you make less than 50,000, whether you make more than 110,000, basically very little statistical difference between any of them. Okay? We also asked about priorities. If a ballot measure like these kinds of ballot measures were considered, what for you as a voter are the priorities? And this is a pretty lengthy list. I have a couple pages here. I'm not showing you all of these, but again, when we're asking the respondent about a finance measure, these are all rotated. They never hear them in the same order, okay? So I'm ranking these by the extremely or very important. So the public disclosure of all spending was the top item. This is the expenditures and elements of the measure on accountability. Let me just highlight the accountability here. The public disclosure of all spending, acquiring all funds used locally, maintaining long-term financial stability, basically maintaining what we currently have and making sure that that money is spent here in our community, not spent somewhere else, and that public disclosure of how it's being spent and where it's being spent is a very important item in all cities, but especially, usually it's not number 1 of all the improvements you're doing. Close behind basically is maintaining 911 emergency response. And you'll notice we asked maintaining in most of these, maintaining what you have, police patrol, these are all, the whole page here is very high. I haven't even included somewhat important here. You can see the red here is almost non-existent. So every expenditure here is important to some degree. Whenever we talked about preventing the elimination of something or talking about cuts, you saw a spike. Okay, this is just preventing the elimination of school crossing guards. All of a sudden, 45% extremely important. Now, overall, it's 73, but you can see the jump here. So again, the basic point here is the voters think it's important to maintain basically your public safety and most all of your local services. Continuation of the same set of questions. Again, these are 60% or above. Again, the red is under 10% in most of these. But again, it's a mix and match of, you can see you're maintaining parks is a little less intense. Preventing the elimination of school safety officers, all of a sudden you see a jump here of 35. Preventing reductions in the number of police. Whenever we mention reduction or prevent the elimination, we had a little more spike again. Maintain what we have, keep what we have because it's good services. Okay? We also gave them some positive information about the measure. This is primarily around the sales tax. We gave some positive. This is a question that would you be convinced or not convinced to support a sales tax measure if you heard these messages which would be made by supporters. At the top of the list, again, is accountability. Tough fiscal independent audits cannot be taken by county or state government. Nobody can take this money. This money stays locally in our community. Cuts. These are the top two basic positive messages that had voters. These are close to 75%. Hearing about the cuts and the potential shortfall, you can see here that it's a very convincing message to voters. Quality of life, being able to continue, keep what we have, 911, well-maintained streets. Same question, contracting, benefits for local police, fire protection, youth programs, what we currently have, local control. State government Sacramento has taken away close to $12 million, City of Los Alamitos, and this is one of our problems why we need money. And the streets. The streets is a little lower as a problem, but that gives you an idea of positive statements. So you started out with 68 to 28 when they heard basically the 75 words. After this information that you just saw, you jumped up 8 points and dropped 9 points. We moved 15 to 20% of the electorate just by giving them 6 basic positive messages. But they learned a great deal about whether it's cuts, how the money would be spent, how the accountability. This is a pretty significant movement just from some positive information. We also, I'm not showing the negative information, but we also gave them some arguments made by potential opponents. Too many taxes. We've had enough. It's wasteful. We can't afford it. So we want to simulate some opposition messages. You can see following the positives, it didn't really get below, dropped at 4 points, 1 point opposition messages compared to what you're communicating to them about your needs and your challenges. Positive side is much more. All right, I think I've hit most of these conclusions. Sales tax, we're suggesting that the sales tax is the most viable. It moves up with positives and holds its own with when opponents are. We're trying to, again, with this opponents, we're trying to simulate someone coming in and spending $200,000 or $300,000, which is probably not likely in most cities, but we want to simulate and give you a conservative estimate. We've already talked about the TOT is viable, but it doesn't raise you as much money. The other items, the other ones we tested, we're not suggesting are viable at this time. Positive directions of the city, the job the city government is positive. We do need to, if you go forward with something like this, my strong suggestion is you do some public education as you are doing systematically throughout the city, just, again, communicate. We're not trying to scare anybody about, right, any of these issues, but we just want to communicate some of the needs you saw, where some cuts might be coming if additional revenue is not available. And then we're suggesting a tracking poll. As you know, you don't have to decide on these till next July or August to put something like this on the ballot. But in most cities, we come back with a shorter survey in June or so and test different options. We're also able at that time to simulate what other measures are on the statewide ballot. It's going to be a number of controversial statewide measures on the ballot. And we would, in your tracking poll, we would test some of those statewide measures and watch your voters walk down the list of split roll, for example, and some of the others that they will be voting on first before they come to yours. There might be some other measures that are ahead of yours, so we would simulate in this tracking survey you in the position of your ballot, watching voters walk down the list of many measures they're going to have that are going to come before you. However, in this, the local measures are going to be at the top of the ballot. Okay? Presidential election will not be at the top. So a little different this time. Okay? Any questions?
I have a couple of questions. And thank you for the presentation. That's very helpful. On slide 7, you mentioned the fact that only 47% of voters believe the city has a great or some need for additional funding. What does this tell you? I mean, what's the importance of that, and how might that impact?
Well, again, if in most cities that pass measures, finance measures, there is clearly an understanding of need, right? We need more money, not for any specific use, but my concern is that 22% don't know. Again, that communicates like the right direction, wrong track. Things are going pretty well here. There's not a serious set of issues that are pushing voters to see that, look, we just need more money to solve these problems. This is the homeless issue in most cities in this state, frankly. This is one of the driving forces. We need more money to solve this problem. And since your problems are all pretty low intensity, it just basically is an understanding of what your challenges are and what your needs are going forward.
Okay, and
which many voters are lacking.
Okay, but notwithstanding that, I think, or I guess that lack of knowledge by a certain percent of the population, that's baked into the rest of the results that show that
it
sales tax
is,
would be
and
viable.
even with that low percentage of need more money, you still get 68% supporting the sales tax.
Okay.
Right? Which is again extraordinary result, because right direction, wrong track, 25% don't know what direction it's going in. Your need is low. But they come back when they hear what the sales tax is and where the money goes. This is a very high starting point, even though they don't fully understand the need why you need more money.
Okay, and how does that compare to other cities that have had similar surveys done, and then?
This is high. This is on the high end.
And,
in most cities, we're 55 to 65. The more democratic voters of color in different cities, the higher percentage of support.
okay,
This is a pretty good, strong, at least starting point.
and the 55% or so starting point that you've seen in other cities, have those cities then gone forward with the sales tax measure?
They have.
And had success?
They have. Most finance measures these days, again, nothing is easy. I'm not trying to suggest anything is easy in passing these. And cities that pass these measures work long and hard with public education programs like you're doing here. But we're passing about 85% of these sales taxes that are put on the ballot for cities.
Okay, thank you.
Again, it's a full court press to educate voters, and having a campaign and you all working together. It's a lot of hard work, but again, your city you saw how dramatically we want to maintain the good quality of services that we have, and we're willing to do a a sales tax to do
Thank
it.
you.
Are you seeing the cities that have not been successful in getting this passed? It's because they're narrowing their scope on where they're going to spend their money, such as underground utilities, where it needs a three-quarter or two-thirds vote? Or are there other reasons why they're not passing?
It's more demographically, the demographics of, here you have a few more Republicans. You have 38% Republican, 35% Democrat. And the higher Republican registration, the higher conservative set of tones the voters have are a little tougher to pass. The orange counties we're still passing them, they're by closer margins, but it's more the demographics of who's voting. In this city, it's this bipartisan, you have Republicans, Democrats, and independents all supporting this. Now, Democrats are supporting this at higher percentages than Republicans, but I think Republicans are supporting this at 54 or 55%, one of the highest I've ever seen of Republican support for local taxes. Very different from the national scene or the statewide when the taxes are being raised. Voters really are coming together these days for many of these same reasons of pulling themselves, wrapping their arms around all of you and saying, we got to take care of ourselves. Right? We're not going to get any help from the federal government, the state government. It's not far behind it, but we know we have to support. This is why school bonds are passing. This is why the community college majors are passing. LA County, we passed 2 or 3 or 4 majors, all at over 2/3. Metro, clean water, parks. Again, LA County is a good area that your voters are supporting these kinds of taxes to maintain and improve their services,
Thank you.
which is important to them.
Could you tell me if it matters in your experience, not really in this program right now, but does it matter much if the taxing percentage is 0.5%, 1%, or 1.5%? Do the arguments pretty much remain the same and the ballot result?
Generally speaking, yes.
Okay.
And if you one of the suggestions in your tracking poll, maybe in the summer, maybe we test a higher amount of 1.5 cents in addition to 1 cent. We usually test different levels. Here we tested 5 or 6 different, very different finance measures. In many cities, which I would suggest if you want to go forward with this, the next survey, you might start with a 1.5 cent, 1 cent, and see if you hold the same margins.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
I understood, and I could be wrong, that the council has to approve to get something on the November ballot in March.
No.
When do we have?
I think it's in July or August of this year. For November.
It would be.
88 days before.
The last date is August 7th, so that wouldn't be an action, would have to be taken as late as July.
Okay. I'm sorry, I was misinformed.
One of the items I forgot to mention here, again, whenever we talked about reducing reductions of anything, we also asked about upgrading first responder training to deal with emergencies such as that shooter situation. This is one of the driving forces for all communities. Let's just keep ourselves safe. Let's go the extra mile to make sure these things hopefully are prevented in our community. And this is one of the driving forces on the safety side.
Could you tell me how long do you expect normally in order to get maximum results? How early do you need to start?
You've started, and as much as you can do for the next 5 months in kind of educating and outreach to your community. In these kinds of, I call them campaigns, but they're education campaigns, you can never do enough, right?
Okay.
It's like the more you can do, the better off you are, and the more thorough and contacts you have based on some of the same facts and figures you have, do as much as you can. And then we come back in the summer and try to measure what effect that has had. Hopefully some of these items have dropped as far as need. More voters understand your need. And the more voters understand about your need, the more your vote's going to go up. I don't know if you can get much higher than this to start with, even with a public education, but it's a safe route to take. The smarter your voters are about what your challenges are, the better off you are.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I've got some questions.
Okay.
Help me understand the process a little bit. You indicated that you sent out 500 surveys. Based on what you report here in slide 1, you got 207 back. That's roughly 41%.
Well, we sent out, what we do is in the voter registration file, first of all, some of the voters have emails already listed. What we do is we pay commercial companies to come in and match as many emails as they can find and match them up and add emails to your voter registration files. So we send every email we have. Everybody who has an email, we send it out. For those who return it, for those who don't return a completed interview, we then take we call them clusters or areas in your cities, and we phone them. Most are done by cell phones, landlines, to fill in those who didn't fill it out online. So the online and the phone is giving us much more, your voters more options on responding to these kinds of surveys.
I understand.
So you're 207. Statewide, we do 800 to 1,000, literally for state initiatives. Across the country, for a national poll, is 1,200. So we spend...
My question is, pardon me for interrupting,
Okay,
207 completed survey interviews.
correct.
So out of the 500 that you sent out,
Well,
either by,
we probably sent more than 500.
okay,
And we spent about 2 or 3 weeks, as I recall, a good 3 weeks, re-emailing and calling and following up. You have a very small voter pool, basically, to start with.
yeah, we do, 6,000 registered voters.
It's a challenge to get interviews finished, but this 207 represents the Republican Democratic split, the homeowner renter split, where they live by council district, right? The proportions all came out, right? You can see the proportions here underneath. 17% of the interviews were in District 1. 22% of the interviews were in District 5.
Oh, those were by districts?
That's based on, yes, council districts. Based on the likely voter percentages that are expected in November of 2020. And again, one of the conclusions here is that your voters are pretty consistent here. Well, this is one of them we're trying to, right up front in the interview, we asked them, give them 75 words of the sales tax, and most voters have not heard about this yet, right? They're hearing the sales tax for the first time, and you get 68% positive information, negative information. You're not below 2/3 at any point, which shows the consistency.
I guess that's subjective from the standpoint of how you look at it. If we've got 6,000 registered voters, we're talking 207 out of that registration based on 500 plus or minus another 500. I'm not getting a good amount of how many actually surveys you attempted that you got the 207 sample. I would like to request to staff a copy of the finished report with the different statistics that he had that's not in this, if that's possible. If it's not, I'd like to know why. On the report on page 6 from staff on our 10-year budget projection, you show in 26, 27, or maybe that's 27, 28, is where the 3.4 million deficit is going to occur. Is that correct?
3.4 million? Yeah.
I'm on page 6 of your report here.
Okay.
Okay. And so if this is implemented after this election, it would be the 21-22 fiscal year. So those funds would start to come in at that particular point. Have you done a projection that shows how much the 3.4 million is going to come in the 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, et cetera, moving forward? In other words, we're not going to get just 3.4 million in the year 26, 27, or 27, 28. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So my concern is this 10-year projection, which actually goes back to 2017, and I think we need to start talking more accurately from the standpoint of the actual year that we're in. I'd like to see the 10-year projection, but I'd like it even further out, because how long is that 3.4 million going to buy us time-wise based on your projections and knowing what PERS and some of the other fiscal constraints that we have? In other words, come 26, 27, we will have had portions of that 3.4 million for at least 3 years, maybe 4. That means we're actually going to have more in 27, 28 than we would without this. Is that correct?
The number that we're showing on the chart that you're referring to does not include the sales tax monies coming in. That's a do-nothing scenario.
Okay. This is just a projection of
Correct.
where we could be.
Right.
Okay.
So that's why we're saying at a minimum, you need 3 million a year to begin to balance the budget. As I've indicated, when you look at the 15-year timeline, we go as high as $3.7 million.
Okay. I
You're
think
going to
that's
generate,
I think that's part of what we need to be transparent about, because I know some of the cities that just did pass the 1% sales tax are already realizing that that's not going to last very long. And if we're going to ask the residents for 1% or 1.5%, which is, we've had that discussion amongst us, should we be asking for more and have specific earmarks from the standpoint of what that money is going to be and what it's going to do? I don't want to just simply go to the taxpayer and say, we need 1%, and then in 20, 30, 31, the council on that day then doesn't have enough money to carry it further. I think we need to be more cost efficient in the process of what we're doing. The alternatives to this has been cuts. And I'm a little disappointed in the survey where one of the cuts talks about 911 dispatch. I never knew that was even a consideration, and I'm assuming that's our share of Westcom, that was even on the table. The statement has been made all the way along that everything is on the table, including Parks and Recreation and the crossing guards and the police officers and everything that we do from a looking standpoint. I have had discussions with the city manager regarding some alternative revenues that I think are out there and that I think we should be exploring. I don't want to mention those at this particular point in time because I would rather come back from the city manager in a report. But I think there's substantial money that could be available to us from alternative sources. We know that the hotel is projected to bring in $275,000. Now, that was based on the estimates when the hotel project came to the city. That was $275,000 brand-new money. I'm concerned that from a fiduciary standpoint, that we are responsible in properly addressing that money. If we bring in, it's like putting more money in your bank and then realizing that, gee, we still have checks, we can spend more. We have to maintain the frugalness of what we're talking about, the restraint process of what we're talking about, even if our money exceeds. We're not doing, there was a reference to streets and the state's money on streets, and we got some pretty sad streets in this city. I've asked several times for I think it's a 7-year plan on street pavements. Been told it's available, been told I can get it. I've not seen it. Those are things that concern me. I don't want to go to the taxpayer and say we need $3.1 million just to take care of pensions until I figure out how we're going to be addressing the pensions in the process. We're not going to solve everything with a 1% sales tax. We're not going to solve everything with a 4% increase on the hotel bed tax. It's all proportionate in the process. I want to make sure when I make a decision on this particular issue, and it's a very critical issue in my mind. These are dollars that our constituents, if you will, are entrusting to us in the process, and I want to make sure that we're doing the right things and that we're being accurate in the process of what we're asking for. I kind of question why this document that we get when we walk up here tonight, first time I've seen it, I believe it's the first time anybody on the dais has seen it. Why didn't we get this with our regular backup material? Was it not available?
The PowerPoint presentation itself?
Well,
Those are the slides.
this statement on the survey, I would have liked, I mean, I'm having trouble reading some of this because the fine print is so fine.
That's just a copy of the PowerPoint presentation we're giving to you this
I
evening.
understand that, but even the PowerPoint isn't going to come across with the information. On a computer, I can raise it up and read it to see what the fine print says. But if we were going to be discussing this tonight, and I appreciate finally getting this, I just wonder why we didn't get it before, to have had the time to look at it over the weekend and try to figure out exactly what it was going to say so we could formulate better questions in the process.
Well, I can certainly provide two reasons for that. One, we were still working on it up until this morning to fine tune that. Second, as you may note, we identified not only this workshop, but also we identified a second date on February 3rd. So we didn't anticipate or expect that tonight would be the only evening. This is an introductory opportunity, a time for discussion. We anticipated that there would likely be questions, need for information. That's why we reserved a second meeting. So we're not trying to withhold information or surprise anybody.
No.
It was a matter of us making sure we had the best information to give to you for presentation tonight. And again, we're here to gather information that you may need between now and February 3rd, should we have a meeting on February 3rd. Again, to make sure you have all of the information necessary to.
Again,
make
February 3rd is the first that I've heard of that date for this. If I can check my calendar and see if I've got
We have
a hold on that date.
Yeah, we have previously mentioned that, council member, publicly, and it has been identified on on your calendars and on ours.
Okay. Well, I can check that. We paid several years ago for an accounting report that was a transparency type report that was put on the website. We've been through at least two financial people since that went on, to the best of my recollection. Is that still being maintained, and is it current? In other words, you can go on to that item, and I'm blanked from the standpoint of what the program is called. But is that program still on the website, A? B, is it still being updated? That was supposed to be the most current way a resident could drill into the budget, drill down right into departments, into police services, into parks and recreation, anything. Do you know if that's still there on the website, and is it being maintained? You think it is?
I don't believe it is. I want to say it's probably a year or two old.
Well, that's disappointing. Okay. I think this is fine. I'll go ahead and prepare some information for the city manager for where we're headed with this. I want the citizens, and I'm sorry, I don't subscribe that 207 is a good number to balance with. And it may be standard, 41% out of 500 is not a bad number. Some of these numbers that you've put on here in terms of the results and the favor match what I think we wanted to find, but I'm more interested in what the reality actually is. I went to, out of the 5 community meetings, I went to 3 of them. And staff told us, gee, we had like 40 people at this particular meeting, and I think that's probably correct, but that 40 people included almost 50% staff in one fashion or another. We did do an outreach, and we have to continue to do that outreach. We have to figure a program of better communication, and I'm all for that. I'm not sold that this is exactly the way we need to go. And I want the taxpayers to have every opportunity to make their decisions correctly and with accurate information. So whether we do more one-on-one type meetings, which we've done to try and help me better understand, I'm open to that. And the same thing from the standpoint of the rest of my colleagues up here, 2 of which are on the Finance or Budget Ad Hoc Committee, and so they've been dealing with it a little bit closer to the heart perhaps, and I appreciate them doing that. But I'll stop at this particular point and continue on with directions or information to you.
Thank you. Could you tell me the rate of return we got, is that considered good, bad? What were your feelings on that?
Rate of return on the number of interviews?
Yes.
I would have liked to have gotten more interviews, right? We spent literally, for the emails we probably sent out to those emails, and I'll have to get exactly how many emails were available. We probably sent out 3 or 4 different, we call them pushes, over a period of 3 weeks to get responses, and then we would probably call each phone 4, 5, 6 times over a period of 2 or 3 weeks to get as many interviews as we can, as long as they matched up demographically.
So let's
So larger communities, if, we're in Long Beach, we're doing 600, 700, 800, because the voter pool is just so much larger and available.
let me assume for a second that we did about 1,000 of these, and we got 207 responses. Is 20% response considered good in your business?
Well, again, we're trying to make sure you have a demographic. Your whatever number you get is representative of your demographic profile of a likely voter. Okay, and that's what the 2.7 is. Whether it's 1,000, we call different clusters and go after different emails, making sure that profile matches your statistics on the likely voters.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I mean, so I think what we're all trying to get at is, you all are the statistical experts, right? And we've paid money to your company, and we want to understand that the survey that's been done, the 207 individuals, is statistically sufficient. I mean, can we rely on that as
It
a
is, and
gauge
that's
and
why-
as a measure of what our residents think about these issues?
Yes, and I put here, it's a margin of error of almost 7%. So any up 7%, down 7%, either way is within the margins. So in most surveys we're doing Long Beach 800, we have a margin of error of 3%. This is a higher margin of error.
And so if we had done more surveys, that margin of error would go down
That is
as a result?
correct.
Okay.
That is
and
correct.
It's 6.8%.
It just means for your vote here on the sales tax, right, a margin of error, you could be at 61 to 35, okay? The margin still for all of these questions is still
that.
successful and strong reaction from your voters to support these measures, even if you take 7 off here and add 7 here.
Right. And it could go the other way, too. It could be
That's
7%
correct.
higher.
That's correct.
Okay. And statistics and these sort of surveys is what you all do every single day?
That is, and as I said, for statewide surveys, the 10, 11, 12 million voters, we're doing 1,000.
Okay.
That's it. So the margin of the number of interviews per million voters in this state is much lower than this.
Okay. Thank you.
And quick question, and I think you said it at the beginning of the presentation, even though we have 6,000 registered voters, you targeted those voters who actually vote, not the ones who registered when they were
That's
18 and have never cast a
That's
ballot.
correct.
Because I know in past elections, we've seen voter turnout of 1,800 voters. So that doesn't shock me that the 6,000 isn't a real number as opposed to the likely voters that you sent the surveys out to.
So we're looking at 207 out of 1,800 voters.
Right.
Again, you have a, we could have gotten more interviews if we would have talked to more of those voters who are on the rolls but don't have a strong history of voting. We want to give you a likely voter based on your demographic profile of those likely voters.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Ron, we thought you were going to say something. Let's take a quick 5-minute break, please, and
I need another Diet Coke.
Like for us to look into additional information that you need that would help you. Certainly, we'd like to hear that in preparation for February 3rd. Again, as I mentioned earlier, February 3rd was identified as a placeholder.
Right.
It sounds like we need to go into that meeting, and again, be it tonight or any time between now and the 3rd, if any of you have information that you think would be for the benefit of consideration, we'd like to know that, preferably tonight. But again, if something comes up at any time, reaching out to us, letting us know so we can gather that information and distribute it accordingly. We'd appreciate that.
okay.
And just as an FYI, I do have the 3rd on my calendar, so thank you.
Okay. So that is it for the open session. We're going to go to closed session.
Thank you, Mayor. The City
Thank you.
Council will now adjourn into closed session to discuss the items listed as 4A and 4B on your agenda.
Thank you. All right, we got to, I promise.